This is Patito's Gang, and today we've got a subject I think should be of enormous interest to anybody who believes in institutions and institution building. Those who are familiar with my work know that essence of my academic journey in more than 40 years actually has been on how institutions help the advance of economic prosperity. Now, institutions are so critical for human progress that whenever I think institutions and think our challenges in Africa, I think the point that Barack Obama, as US president, made on African soil, first comment on African soil, a speech he made in Accra, Ghana, on his first visit to Africa. What Africa needs is strong institutions and not strong men. But we find that institution building is not an easy track. We have come to a point where one of our institutions that still has some reverence, the judiciary, put under so much pressure in the delegation of the voters' power to the judiciary in the elections process in Nigeria. 80% of our elections are now sorted out by judges. What is the consequence for the judiciary as an institution? What is the effect of this on the whole voting process? Who should we hold accountable for enabling a building of the institutions that we need, like the judiciary, and saving them from the kinds of challenges that they're encountering by this abdication from the judicial process? Where did we begin to get it wrong? How can we get out of this rot, this mess?
Well, if you ask me, I would say that the first thing first means that the judiciary must be independent from all other branches of government. And they need to realize that. Because realizing that puts them on equal pedestal with other branches of government.
But the judiciary is run by human beings.
Yes, it is. But we're getting there, sir, because you did mention about the institution. It is an institution of its own. And there's somebody who, in one of these episodes, actually broke down what meaning of institutions mean. And I never heard of it in that angle. He was trying to say that institution is not like building and any of those things, but it actually has to do with character that people portray.
Institutions are about boundaries.
Boundaries and all that.
Boundaries to conduct.
Yes, conduct.
Allow people to behave properly
in a manner,
because of the rewards and punishments that come from the
Good.
system.
Maybe you're the one that actually tried to explain that here. So my point is that the judiciary have been bastardized in the process of trying to be seen to be working with the government and thereby forgetting their role as the last hope for a common man.
For me, I would say yes, but you're right. You said 80%. I say about 85 to 90% of our electoral decisions are made by the courts, either from the political party primaries decisions up to Supreme Courts to who eventually becomes the president. I have my sympathy towards those Nigerians because they are men and women, like everybody else, who have to bear this brunt. And the accountant in me will also add the fact that the humongous amount of money that is voted from voters' education to voters going to the polls, and then at the end of the day, the whole thing is put aside, running into trillions since 1999, monies that would have been devolved into some other areas of human capacity development is gone. And then you now make these judges to be faced with what you want to call, a tremendous pressures, sometimes, I dare say, perhaps with gun on the head, that you either do it this way or you perish. Having said that, I also want to believe that we've had judges, and we've had judges in this country. There are judges who have stood, their own. The danger at the end of the day is that famous saying that says, if the poor continues to be pushed to the wall, one day the poor will begin to eat the rich. We are in dire situations, and I hope and I pray that we are able to.
I'm even more concerned about saving the judiciary in insulating them. It's their role, it's their job, but if we keep badgering them with dependence on them for outcomes then we might as well stop voting and just constitute a judicial panel to decide who is the next governor of this state or who is the next. Because we see clearly that.
Let me come in, Prof. You see, I was listening and I know that somehow we tend to avoid the background to this. Number one is that it looks like Nigerians are allergic to strong institutions. Now, we can trace that back from whenever we start. If you want to stop at just 1960, start from there. We have those who are stuck in the 19th century. We have those who are now in the 20th century. And then we have those like you who leapfrog into the 21st century.
I thought I was in the 19th century.
No. I think you are leapfrogging into the 21st century.
Well, they're not too young to the wrong way. People are the one leapfrogging.
Well, I didn't see them doing that, if you ask me. And then these are people who can sit down and begin to analyze and realize, number one, that we need strong institutions. If you don't have them, even in the ministries, you don't have them in the legislature, you don't have them even in the executive, why would we single out the judiciary? Now, there's a problem. There was a time we had a vibrant, for you to understand, we had a vibrant judiciary, and we had what you call the Nigerian Bar Association. I remember Akabashon, in those days he was that vocal, he was strong, and what happened? Immediately, those who say this could become a threat to our hold on power decided, okay, so maybe that is where it's now happening, and they moved in there. For you to now have a bar association election, you'll be shocked what happens. Yeah. Government gets interested in who becomes the next person to MBA chairman. The same way, but once you create a problem, automatically they go for control. So, and this has got to do with some form of insecurity.
It's a phenomenon in the evolution of the state in post-colonial Africa. It was called the cooperative state. The cooperative state looks for sources of descent and strength and incorporates.
Immediately.
So you bring them in and squelch their voice. So at a point in time, under Babangida clearly, the NBA president was a stepping stone to Attorney General. They would get the NBA president, make him Attorney General, and from that position, his voice is more or less silenced. You get the NMA president, make him Minister of Health. The cooperative state in post-colonial Africa is a classic, challenge that, ironically, in many places, judiciary was the only one that was sort of insulated from, but it seemed that somehow we managed to get there.
If I hear you well,
Badging in and breaking down the walls of the judiciary somehow. Go back to the days of judges like Oputa, like what's his name, Esho. Go back to Chicago Esho. Go back to the days of. There were so many of them who were such extraordinary, dignified human persons.
They were allowed. They were allowed by the people in power at the time. And when they showed what they could do, those who will take over said the first thing to do, make sure we don't let such people grow. There are so many of such still in the judiciary with such characters. But that's just it. They are not allowed.
They were not just allowed, and by their conduct, both from the intellect, their worldviews, their exemplary way of living, were able to demonstrate that these people were a class apart. And Prof, like you said, Oscar, I agree with you 100%. The institutions have not been allowed to work. We could extend this discussion and even say in the medical, in the Agberos, National Union of Road Transport Workers, correct, the labor unions, correct, government has decided to infiltrate all this just because they wanted to do a capture.
Yeah, but you see, that is really the problem of the absence of
strong institutions,
intellectual leadership, thought leadership, public conversation. Because this is where the world educates itself. And you get to a point where even those people realize that it's in their best long-term interest to have these strong institutions to hold them in check. Because you see, you can get away with a moment. Let's assume your friend is in power. You are enjoying, everything is going well for you. Tomorrow your friend is out of power and you are suffering. The fellow who was, suffering yesterday is now after a while,
we saw that so many times.
You all begin to come to a sense that, wait a minute, it's better for me not to have advantage because my friend is in power. And so let there be a level playing field. So everybody who makes the right effort, that's what institution building is about. It evolves. So we're in a place where, let's be honest, the world now sees Nigeria as a laughing stock. Our democracy is a joke. The judiciary is under so much pressure and all of that. After a while, we should be saying, but why is Ghana where it is on the failed state index and Nigeria is where it is?
You did mention
and all of that.
You did mention
Then we begin to say, wow, wait a minute, we should do it differently.
You talked about the politics in the judiciary. And we have all identified that that is actually the problem. Now, how do we begin to curb this so that there shouldn't be...
I can tell you. Abacha had a conference. 94, 95 maybe. He had his own conference. One of the major things from the Judicial Committee was, look, you know what? Separate the judiciary. Number one, the Minister for Justice can be different from who the Attorney General is. That's number one. Number two, the judges should have their budget first line. That's it. They don't need to go to any governor or any president for purposes of getting money to run the judiciary. In other words, creating that independence for the judiciary. That is a recommendation still in our books. What have we done? Ignored all.
We'll take a break, go to the people to speak to us, and when we come back, we can take this conversation further.
When the government is saying that way, it will be reduced. We don't want people that are just striving to get there.
INEC itself announced that we have in the court over 770 petitions post-election arising from what transpired during that election. And the explanation offered by the chairman of that body, Professor Yakubu Mahmoud, is that the elections in Nigeria have become more competitive. And because they've become more competitive, you have many petitions arising from the process. However, the judiciary appears to be overworked, terribly overworked. In the Supreme Court alone, so many cases. We have had reports of judges having to take cases till very late in the night. And the informed opinion is that it's not just that the elections in Nigeria have become competitive, it's just because there is a lack of real democracy, the kind of democracy that people are looking for, and hence you are faced with a lot of infractions. Secondly, the average Nigerian politician is a sore loser. It is assumed that what you cannot get at the ballot box, you can get in court. Three, there were so many irregularities in the conduct of the elections, and this is perhaps the most serious of the problems.
And we are back. This is Patito's Gang, and we're still talking about the judiciary and the challenge of outsourcing the elections process to the judiciary. We know clearly that we can make a great difference if the people feel that they own the process, they get the politicians to account directly to them. The people will then begin to see more compassionate politics because it can touch the politicians. But right now, this whole business of election by judiciary insulates the politician from the people. Politicians think the process is about saving as much money as you can to use to try and whatever you do through the judicial system. So they are disconnected from the people, and it's affecting our democracy. We have a democracy of politicians who are disconnected from society, and therefore don't work towards the public good, the common good of all. What are the things that we could, as a people, do to rescue the judiciary from the corner we've boxed them into, literally speaking? How can the political party process save this democracy from the kinds of stresses that it is throwing out there?
Let me quickly say the political party process will never save anything. They will be made to save things. The survival of this society is resting totally on the organized civil society. Now, if they decide today, we take one thing at a time, and we say, we now want to do a major job. And what is the job? Social evangelism, which is equivalent to what we're doing right now. And we focus on the judiciary. Put it on the table until certain decisions are taken. And what are the decisions? They are all there in the books. Everything you could do to turn this judiciary around for the good of everybody, they're already there. Researches have been done, all sorts of conferences have been done, papers have been written. All it takes is a group that says, you know what, we want to get this working. And if the judiciary starts working, it means you have laid the foundation on which every good thing can grow. That is the foundation of law and order.
The rule of law is central to society making progress in the modern era.
But so far,
one of the things we also need to look at is that we need to get our politicians, like you rightly said. No, it's okay. I'm coming up with something. To actually have regard for the judiciary. I give you an example. Not too long ago, we had our president went into Nigerian Bar Association to say that government has power over the judiciary. And I don't think that is right.
It's wrong.
It's completely wrong. So when you begin to hear this kind of a thing and nobody is challenging it, guess what? We end up making that institution weaker than it should be. So it's also equally important to make sure that those who are sitting on the bench understand their purpose. One of them is they are independent, for crying out loud. They should find every means, every power within their destiny to make sure that they don't get influenced.
There's a sense in going back to part to Tomi, and I heard you very clearly, Oscar. In the production process, you have raw materials which you have to put together, and then you get the complete thing to now sell, and put value on. I am very, 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 very in agreement with the fact that the political parties and the characters that go into political parties need some reform. We must have a complete change of attitude because, it's from this lower raw material that eventually the NGO gets into and stuff like that.
That happen. That comes through. Oscar, you have a thesis of 19th century, the 20th century, 21st century people, and that the people who believe Kabiesi, you can do no wrong, and all of that, that they are still a dominant factor in the process. Where is it leading us?
Nowhere.
This is where we are as a people, so they are shortchanging even themselves. So it takes, but they don't know. That's the point I'm trying to make. That That is why we need thought leadership. Thought leaders, people like you sitting here, speaking at the issues, the consequences for everybody, will lead to those people realizing suddenly, wait a minute, it's not actually in my interest to do this thing that I think is my self-interest. In the medium term, long term, I am shooting myself in the foot.
One other thing that the citizens have to participate too. The citizens have to participate. They would. Let me tell you how they can participate.
It is not participating. The citizens start and finish it. So there's nothing like participating.
Okay, so they have to own it because there has to be a way to discourage this electoral process.
Look at the demography.
In taking people, assuming, for example, I mean, this is where it all starts. You did mention of the civil society, which organized civil society.
I was just trying to reinforce what you are saying. Okay. Look at the demography that we have. They say we are about 200, estimated 201, of which more than 50 to 60% are youths. And if election can be one man, one vote, what stops the youths? Just by exercising.
Because this is actually despoiling their future. This is young people. I mean, the whole political process in Nigeria is damaging their future.
Now, look at the demography of women. I hear also that they say either because of culture or whatever it is, women may not be able to become this and that, and look at the kind of representation we have of women in national affairs. If you take the interest of women within that demography that we are talking about, they are a force to be reckoned with. And before you know it, all these big men and all these convoluters of the system and institutions will go to their early graves.
Isn't it more difficult in an environment in which we have state capture at the same time as regulatory capture? Most people who make money in Nigeria today are businessmen who have captured the regulators. So when you lay over the crony capitalism that comes from state capture and regulatory capture, you have a conquered people. And the business class has a vested interest in keeping this political class that has a vested interest in keeping the people poor.
And so only the act of God can rescue.
One of the best conversations around this subject is Neil Ferguson's conversation in the book Civilization about the making of the American Constitution and what separates the United States from, say, an Argentina. We have started very badly with constitution making in Nigeria. We didn't think like the founding fathers of the US thought in the making of their constitutions. So that has been an albatross on our system. Having said that, a group of activist citizens engaging properly can make things happen for them because it's the collective good that we're looking at here. But somebody argues, a friend of mine, cogent argument, and I'm sure I started agreeing with him in the beginning. He says, look, the middle class from which these views can come, who stand in the gap for everybody, have been reduced to a point where the fight, the battle to stay in the middle is so intense. Their children must go to school abroad because the school system has collapsed in Nigeria, and the school fees is 10 times their salary. So they are doing 20 different things they should not be doing just to be able to pay children's school fees. And you tell them, look, there's something wrong with the judiciary and they say, look, don't disturb me. I need to just go and get that next $20,000 for my children's school fees. So this is a kind of situation that they say we have gotten to. Unfortunately, time is out and we've got to go. But Nigerians have their work cut out for them. We have our work cut out for us. Because this system is not going to work. It's not sustainable. It's either we get to that point of collapse and get on that road to Somalia on a fast track, or we all realize we're about to destroy ourselves and do something about it. If you follow us, you can continue on our social media handle, and they're all there, Instagram, Facebook, and so on and so forth, and you can continue to exchange views with us as we go down. This has been Patito's Gang, and we'll see you next week.